What's up, everybody? It's George Gabriel, Logic Pro cycle recording and comping. To use or not to use? That is the question. Logic Pro has got this feature that is pretty powerful. It's called comping, and you can also do some pretty powerful recording using cycle recording. But do you always want to use it? That is the question that we're going to ask in this video and hopefully answer for you. And it really just depends on the situation. We're going to show you recording with and without using comping, and another technique that I use that I think is far more efficient. Let's get started. So typically when we record, what we do is we actually practice before we actually hit the tape. If you're going to rent studio time, you better be prepared. Otherwise, it's going to cost you a lot of money to get it going and record everything you want to do if you're practicing in the studio. But now with home studios, we have the luxury of just taking as much time as we want. And therefore, things like cycle recording, it's like, I'm going to take 65 takes and I'll find the best one. That's fine. But if you're doing this professionally, it might take you a lot longer to do it that way than to just be rehearsed, know exactly what you're playing and laying it down. That's what we used to do in the studios when we were booking time. For instance, when a vocalist comes in, you expect them to be able to sing their part and nail it. They've rehearsed ahead of time, they know the lyrics, they're not learning it for the first time. However, if you're doing something for a demo singer that may be hearing it the first time, you might want to opt to use those comping things. But I maintain that comping sometimes actually takes more time in the long run, and I'm going to show you why that is. It's the same with guitars. If you want to get that solo down, it seems like if I'm just going to keep on playing and playing till I find that solo that's going to be the solo that I want to record. Now, if you're using comping in tracks, you're going to hope for that magical moment that's just going to suddenly appear and then you can edit it together. Or if you're using cycle recording, it's just going to create a bunch of different files that you can later edit together. But I maintain that if you actually practice your parts and know exactly what you're doing, it's much easier to not use those things. Let me show you by going into Logic. Okay, I'm in Logic Pro and I dialed up the song that is the promo song on my video when you open up the YouTube page, that little 1-minute thing, and it's actually conducive for guitar solo. Now, as a guitarist, you know that a lot of times you just like to solo because it's fun. I mean, let's face it. And what could start off as something simple, next thing you know, you've blown an hour going completely berserk on a solo and you actually haven't gotten anywhere because all you wanted to do was have fun. So this is the section I'm going to use to illustrate that. So it's a fun little part to play over. So I'm going to go down to my guitar track here. And really, you know, this is typically how it happens.
A few minutes later. 20 minutes later. One hour later. Eventually. 12 o'clock midnight. Two hours later.
Well, you know, after an hour of that kind of crap, you just realize, like, I've accomplished nothing, but I've had a lot of fun, and now I've got to actually get something to record here. So, cycle record and comping. So one way you could do this is just go into record while you're in cycle mode. If you do that, you have to look at your settings. If you go to Logic settings and you just go to recording, you'll see that they have overlap track recordings. And what you can do here is you can choose it for MIDI or you can choose this for audio. What we're working on today is just audio. With cycle off, you have three choices: create take folder, create new track, and create track alternative. Now, what this does is cycle is off. If I record and I re-record, this is what it's going to do. So I'll move this over here and you can see what's going on. So cycle is off. I'm going to record and here we go. Now, if I decide to record anywhere within this region, you'll see what happens. Let's see if I just decide to record here. And right now it's going to create a take folder. So let's do that. Now when I stop, you'll see that this is now a take. I got my first take and I got my second take, and I can choose what I want to do with either one of them by deciding areas that I'm going to allow it to play. So I can take this here and I can take this here, and it will bring it together. So that is what that does. Now I'm going to undo that because I don't particularly care for this feature. And you guys are going to tell me, oh, you're crazy. I use that all the time. That's fine. If that works for you, that's fine. But the other thing you can do is create a new track. So now let's go back to that same spot, and I'm going to go into record. Now what you can see what this has done is this has created a whole nother track, and they're not tied together to that editing system. There is one more option that you can do, is create a track alternative. So I'm going to undo this last thing and try it again and see what happens. Now you can see if I go to this, I can look at my alternative. I can go to the take A, I can go to take B. That can be really helpful. So really those are the three options that you have when you're recording a solo when cycle record is off. I'm going to put cycle record on, and you'll see you have these same three ideas here. Create a take folder, which is really the comping, create tracks and mute the prior track, or create track alternatives. Let's take a look. So I'm going to delete that take, and I'm going to go ahead and go from scratch and see what happens. So you can see what it's doing is it's taking that take. Now, the version I have to this particular thing is that, let's say you want a little bit of each. You can do that totally. But what it does is it's a little bit more cumbersome. So if I like this, let's say, I like this part. I have no idea what's going to happen here. And then I like this part. So please choose this. And then let's see what happens. To me, that's fine, but the thing is, I think this is a little bit more cumbersome than it needs to be. You can disagree with me. I actually like to do it a completely different way. So that is using the comping version. Now, if I undo all those takes and start from scratch and go to my settings and instead create tracks and mute them, to me this is a little bit more reasonable, because what it does is it allows me to listen to each take, and I don't have to use this little thing where I'm dipping in and out of that. I like to just kind of figure out what I am listening to and what I like, and use an editor to edit it. So this is the result you'll get when you do that. Okay, so now you see it muted the last take each time, and so these are separate things, so I could just listen to them separately. So if I like that take, I can listen to the next take. Let's say I can mute this, go to the next take, and see what I got here. and then go to the next take. So what are your options here? Instead of using that little thing, you can use your scissor tool and cut in and out what you like and what you don't like. But again, comping is kind of an evil thing. Let's face it. Nobody really likes comping. Everybody really hates comping. Anybody who says that they like comping is a flat liar. And to me, it becomes more work to actually go through all these and then edit them together. The last option that we have, deleting all these. The thing with this is it creates a bunch of extra tracks, and so that's fine. I like to keep it clean. I'll delete those. But if I go to the track alternatives, a little bit cleaner of an option, you can just use that menu to do the alternatives. Let's try that out. Now you're going, what's going on here? Where all my tracks go? Well, they're right here, A, B, and C. So again, another way to look at this, another way to flip around and do it that way. Now, I will say when you're doing this or you're doing vocals like this, it takes a little bit more time when you have a lot of tracks. And I think what I focus on is usually if I'm using a singer or if I'm creating a solo, I'm taking the time to learn something and I'm recording it. So let me get rid of this for a second and show you kind of how I do this. So if I take all these out of here, let me undo those takes. And I get back to something clean. What I like to do, I like to dial up an identical track of the same track. So I have two tracks to work from that are actually the same track. So if you go to the track menu, go to other, go to new track with the same channel, which I've assigned to my F5, what happens is if I hit F5, it creates the same track. So what I like to do is I like to have my upper track as the track that everything is going to live in, and my lower track is the track that I'm tracking in. And then I can decide, hey, I'm going to write this all instead of just going berserk and hoping that something great comes out. No, really what we do when we go to the studio or when we're doing a piece of music, we want to write something that's cohesive. Everything that I've just done here is just ridiculous. And so now it's just like, hey, let me write this section and do it. So let's say I want to start out with like a... So now I can like focus on exactly what I'm going to do. Now that performance kind of sucked, but the idea is I'm going to take cycle record off. I'm going to start my recording one bar before I want the solo to begin. And that gives me a little bit of time to get ready for the spot. And so I'm going to practice what I want to do, which is something like... something like that. So I can do this in sections and you're gonna be like, poser, you can do it in sections. Honestly, a lot of times when I'm recording, I have to do it for television or something like that. And there's a deadline and I don't really have time to sit and feel the love and master the playing. I know what parts I want and then I'm going to record those parts and then I'm gonna record the next part and I'm gonna edit them together. Full disclosure. All right, so that was kind of what I wanted to do. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay, a little sloppy, but hey, you know what? This is for video purposes here. This is not for perfection, and I'm just making this up on the spot, so forgive me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delay it because typically we're working in a cycle here. You can notice that I have low latency on, but we typically hear things and by the time it gets around, we end up playing ahead of time to actually line up to what we're hearing. So I always use my delay feature here to actually delay it and see if that sounds better, like more accurate what I intended to do. So that last little thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up here, and I know I just need to nail that little part. So I'm just going to go ahead on a bar before that. So what I'll do is I'll trim it real fast. and see if it works. So now I'm going to just dump it over there. Let's not forget to delay this puppy, because I was playing a little bit ahead. Honestly, this whole thing should be 60 clicks. Let's try that. Right, so that seems to work, and you can't even really tell what I did there. It all blends together. But the idea here is that you continue to do this method, and I think it's a little bit faster because you're actually recording what you want to record and not just hoping that by happenstance you're going to get this magical moment. Now, there is a time and place for that. Let's say you're doing the same solo over and over again, and you practice it, and you want to get different takes on that same solo. I'm making this up on the spot, so I have no idea what I'm doing. But a lot of times we practice the solo so many times that we have it down ahead of time, and now it's just really what's the best take. And that is where cycle record or using comping can actually be a benefit. To me, if you're recording on the fly and you want to try to write the parts as you go, this is the method to use. If you are doing something that you have memorized and you know exactly what you want to do and you're just looking for the best take, that's when you use the cycle record, and you can use it in the various different ways I showed you. It's the same concept with vocals. When you're using comping, I think vocals are better if you actually record using this method. You can take longer takes, like a line at a time or whatever, a couple lines at a time, and then dip in and out by using this method where you're doing the same channel and you're actually cutting out the sections that don't work. Now, there's other options obviously available. You could use the punch in, punch out, but I like to have a little bit more control, like to get the breaths in, like to get the times out, and this gives you more control over the long run. And actually, for me, this is much faster. Assuming you're working with professionals, hopefully you don't have to take 50 or 60 takes. There's nothing worse than comping 60 takes on one line of a vocal. If you have that problem, get another singer. But in the end, Logic is a magical program that has so many different options. And we didn't even discuss punching in and punching out, but that is also an option too. Really, the idea behind this video is to show you the different methods that you can use and the different applications where you can use them. And as you know, my goal is always to have the best workflow. What is the fastest workflow? What's your deadline? Maybe you do want to sit around and listen to your solo 17 times and decide exactly which best take you have. That's fine. But when you're in the TV business or the film business and you have a deadline at hand, you don't have the luxury of doing that. You're making a record, fine. But I would even submit, if you're making a record, you're prepared to actually play the part that you wrote and you know it. I turn comping off completely in Logic because I can't stand that workflow. I think it's terrible. And I know some of you are out there like, what do you mean? That's the best thing ever. Comping is the best. I love comping. Fine. You can love it. I go for efficiency. I go for less tracks. And let's not forget, when you do cycle record and comping, you're creating more audio files. You're creating a longer audio file. And most of us don't go and clean up our sessions. So what happens is you have these massive audio files. If I take 18 takes on something and you multiply that by every time you do that, well, now your session is heavy. It's weighted down with big audio files. I go for clean and efficient, just like we did in the studio. You get it on the tape and that's it. There is no extra takes. You just played it right to begin with. So what's your opinion on this? What do you use? What's your method that you crave? Is it comping? Is it cycle record and creating other audio files? Is it using the takes? Or do you have an alternate method that is even better than my alternate method? I'd like to know. Why don't you leave it in the comments? If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Click that bell icon to be notified of future videos. And follow me on Instagram at GGabrielMusic. Look forward to seeing you the next time on George Gabriel Music.